Welcome back to the Bear Facts. We don't often do the same guest in a row, but the feedback that we had in regards to Blue Mind, Dr. Wallace J. Nichols, has been quite astounding. So I spoke with Jay and he has kindly offered to return, and we're going to do it in a Q&A format today. So firstly, welcome back, Jay.
Thank you so much for inviting me. That's always a good sign. Whether it's dinner or a podcast, it's always a good sign to be invited back.
It's a very broad statement, but in the world that we're living in now, we all need a bit more of a blue mind. So,
agreed.
People got a lot from your first podcast, so let's get some more from it today. I'm going to kick straight into the questions. The first one's from me. So, you said in the first one, in regards to cleaning up the environment, particularly the ocean, we need to take a different approach. So you were talking about telling people off and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. It doesn't work. It's almost like a negative is encouraging more of a negative.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to ask was, I've been listening to a lot of Esther Hicks recently about how a negative attracts a negative and a positive attracts a positive. So would you agree with that statement, in particular when you were talking about the way that we have to change how we say to people to look after the environment, particularly the ocean?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you're gonna. And my first thought with that question is, thinking of my daughters when they were younger, and as a parent, you want to teach them what you can and encourage certain behaviors and discourage others. And I found, and also was told, that the more you say don't do something, you're kind of encouraging them to do that thing. And there are better approaches to teaching kids, your own kids, and probably other people's kids, say the difference between right and wrong, or what the gray area is, and what consequences are, and what responsibility is, and making, we would gamify chores and make them really fun, or maybe make them a little bit competitive, like who could clean the room the fastest, and I would time them, or who could get to the doorway fastest, and we would race, and just bringing more joy, we were talking about earlier, into our lives. And I found that works, not just with kids, but with adults, and in our work on saving sea turtles and coastal cleanup efforts. Repeatedly, I've just seen it, research aside, theory aside, scientific publications aside. And I was at a Society for Conservation Biology conference once, given a paper and attending the other presentations. And the most interesting presentation, and off the top of my head, I can't recall the presenter, but she was a sociologist. And she said something like, the best way to get people to change behavior is to let them know that all of their neighbors are doing that thing that you want, hopefully, them to do. And just leave it at that. And in her research, scolding people, guilting people, scaring them, berating them, bombarding them with facts, bugging them, educating them, worked less well than just saying, hey, everybody in the neighborhood does X except for you. And then, like, here's a bottle of wine, have a nice day. And I just thought that was fascinating. True or not, it was worth a try. And so it's peer pressure, writ large, adult size. That said, there are times when that doesn't work, where we need, other tools, policy, laws, enforcement, penalties, innovation. Let's go even bigger than those tools. I think innovation, just, outlive the bastards, outwork the bastards. I don't like that word bastard, by the way, but that's the phrase. uh, and innovate, innovate through the problem, come up with a more beautiful, more fun, more efficient solution that does the thing, solves the problem better, and share it as widely as you can. And so that's another approach, and it kind of connects. If you can come up with a more beautiful, more enjoyable, more efficient, more fun way of doing things, tastier but better for you, you know, that's another way to solve problems, is just to do it better and put the old way out of business, so to speak, literally or figuratively.
So what about at a local level? So speaking from experience, I live across the road from a city beach, and for a majority of the year, it's very clean. It's very nice to swim in. During summer, people come from everywhere. They come down on the hot days, and the trash that is left that invariably ends up in the ocean, it's just appalling. How do you educate people at a local level, or people coming to a beach? Like, there's signs everywhere, there's bins everywhere.
Sure.
People just don't seem to care.
Yeah, signs are well-meaning, and they're relatively easy to fund, make, and put up. They don't work that well. Again, back to that idea that information isn't what compels us to make behavior change. We think it is. We think it should be, really should be. We should be logical people who gather all the information to make rational decisions. We're not. We had a very similar situation in Santa Cruz on the Monterey Bay. I was on the board of an organization called Save Our Shores for a decade. And Save Our Shores did a lot of beach cleanups after every holiday, every weekend, particularly in the summer, when lots of people came to the region to go to the beach. And then the organization would organize people of all ages to go out the next day and with bags and, you know, gloves and buckets, and do beach cleanups and measure how much the trash weighed and document it really well, and get grants and get donations to keep doing that. And then one 4th of July, which is a big holiday in the US that people like to go to the beach, I suggested a pilot study in which, on the 4th of July, we took all of our volunteers and deployed them at the pathways that led to the beaches. So, you know, at these bottleneck points, where access points, and greeted people on their way to the beach and said, you know, good morning, good afternoon, happy 4th. Here's a bag for your trash. Here's a blue marble in advance to say thank you. Here's a sticker that says, you know, live blue, or a blue mind, or something cool, Save Our Shores. We are endeavoring to be the cleanest beach in California, and we'd like you to help us win. Have a good day. So 15-second spiel. Here's the bag to clean things up. Here's a sticker and a marble, cost a few pennies. And then see what happens the next day. That beach was cleaner than any other beach.
Wow.
The effort was not on us and our children to go and pick up disgusting crap, which is the case normally. It was on each individual to be responsible, and they were challenged to even be extra responsible. Clean up, pack out your own trash, and if you see any extra, please help out, because we want to win cleanest beach in the state. I don't even think there was a cleanest beach in the state contest. We made it up, but we still want to be it. And it was just an experiment, little pilot project, and I would say it was a bit of a success. Can you scale that? If you have the volunteers who are willing to volunteer and go and do disgusting work the day after a holiday, would they be willing to do nicer work, you could say, cleaner work, at least social related working, at the same beach to prevent the mess by not scolding people, not saying, here are the rules, you potential rule breaker, you nasty human, don't be disgusting again. That's not the message. It was playing to their better angels and saying, we fully expect you'll help us make this beach better than it's ever been. And here's the tool to do it. And so the lesson there is kind of that change the environment and you change behavior. And in this case, the environmental change that we did was we provided a toolkit. We provided a little bit of joy, a little bit of gratitude, a priori, before the beach day. And so somebody in each group, when it was time to leave, hopefully it was sober enough to say, we have a job to do before we leave. Maybe it was a child in the family or somebody who paid a little extra attention. Or maybe that group forgot, but the one next to them looked over and said, hey, we're packing our trash today. It's 4th of July and you got to marble a sticker in a plastic bag to pack your trash. Way better. So I'm not saying that's a fix for Sydney or any other city, coast in the world. But that's the kind of thinking I'm talking about when we think of let's be a little more innovative. Yeah. Let's shake up the business as usual approach. Let's try some experiments.
Give some ownership.
And yeah. I mean, it's those are powerful emotions. Like when you feel like you've been recruited to a cool project and that you've been assumed to have dignity by strangers and given a little gift in advance in appreciation and expectation that you're an excellent human being. Not everybody rises to the occasion, that's for sure, but you game the system a little bit in that direction. And it's true, I'm at a tall ships conference right now in Baltimore, and a lot of these amazing ships that take people out on the ocean in kind of the old school way take kids out. And one of the messages today was that these kids are so much more capable than we act like they are in modern society. Yeah. Like 15-year-olds after a week at sea come sailing back in to the harbor, sailing the ship. It's their ship. They went out a week ago. They didn't know anything. They might have been considered at-risk youth, stuck with their nose in their phone. And they come back, young adults, sailing these, incredible sailing ships. And really, I'm not just like, hey, let's step to the side so you can take a selfie at the helm. No, really, it's their ship. And in some of the programs, that's actually the rule. We're not going back in until this is your ship and the adults are kicking it, taking it easy. And the kids step up. In some cases, it's the first time they've ever been asked to really step up to something that challenged them and scared them a bit. But they looked around and said, I think we can do this. Can we? Let's try. Let's learn. They got the support. They got the tools. They got the training. And then it's their ship. So similar kind of dynamic there. Yeah. And again, with the backdrop, the backstop, I guess, the safety net of the, enforcement is maybe your last resort, where you penalize people and you write tickets and for littering and all of that. But I think we haven't really tried the former enough yet. It's a little harder. You have to talk to people. You have to look them in the eye and say good morning, and explain a few things and have some patience. But I think if we're hoping to turn all this, the big ship, Earth around, I think that's part of the equation.
Yeah. let's go into the water. So the second question I have is from Fleur, who is a meditation and mindfulness coach. And she writes, "Hi, Jay. Loved listening to your first podcast." She said, "You had me at the moment. You reflected on your childhood and being called shy when in fact you were observing and taking it all in." She said, "This was my childhood also." She grew up near a wild expanse of ocean. While others were swimming, she often just stared out at the waves and said a little prayer of respect and gratitude. What Fleur wants to know is, as an adult, she still has the same love, but when it comes to swimming too deep, she is scared. Do you have any advice to overcoming this? Or is her blue mind simply staying on the surface on a stand-up paddleboard or on the ocean foreshore?
Great question. And, you know, everybody I've met is there and is exactly there. You're not alone, Flora. Great. And thank you for your words. And so some people's kind of tipping point is deeper and bigger and scarier. And for some, it's getting in the water at all, like my mom. And so my advice to people who are trying to grow their skills and their aptitudes and their confidence around water is take tiny nibbles of it. And so when, you know, the people who are really good at teaching people to swim, who are absolutely afraid, terrified of being in the water, if you watch them, it's so incremental. It's not, you don't throw people over the side of the boat in the deep water and say, good luck, figure it out. That's the old way of doing it. I guess you could try that, but not recommending it. But the incremental confidence building. And, you know, I did a Grand Canyon trip with a fella, with a big group. And one of the members of the group was a former pro NBA basketball player and played for the Golden State Warriors. His name's Festus Ezeli. So very tall guy, incredible athlete, but scared, kind of not a swimmer. I wouldn't say scared of water, but he's like, I'm going on this whitewater trip down the Grand Canyon, and I don't know how to swim. And I said, stick with me. I'm going to give you daily swim lessons, and by the time we're done with this, you'll be set. And in fact, he was. And so what we did was we would stand in this eddy on the beach at the end of the rafting or during a break. And day one, we held hands. And we walked until the water was to our chest. So for him, it was like his knees, and it was my chest because it's like 6'11". And I said, let's, holding hands, facing the water, let's just bend our knees until the water comes up and then goes down, and let's back up. Day one. And it went pretty well. And then I said, do you think you want to try that again? But this time we won't hold hands. Exactly the same thing. You know, the current, there's no current right there. He said, sure. So that was day one. And each day we added just a little bit extra to that. And by the time we got to this little tributary of the Colorado River called the Little Colorado, hiked up it, beautiful blue water. He had his life vest on. He just jumped in and then rode the rapids with no boat, just floating. And, you know, I thought we were going to do it together, but he just jumped in and said, I got this. And he had it 100%. I posted a great video of that whole experience with him. And it's really heartwarming and really, really fantastic. This guy is like he's an elite athlete. Like he's an NBA champion and famous for it. And here he was learning these aquatic skills and taking it on and accomplishing it. So I would just say add a little bit. There's a lot of water you can spend time in that isn't deep. So if you decide that's just not your thing, it's all right. You know, shallower water, mid-depth water, paddle boarding, snorkeling in shallower water, canoeing, fishing, boating of all kinds. I mean, it's 1,000 things you can do and not have to go into swimming and diving into the deep water. So just take an incremental, easy approach. Other thing is having a good guide is important. Having a pushy guide or an aggressive guide or coach can be unnerving and cause anxiety and then make you not want to do it. But having somebody with a little bit of a soft touch that understands your trepidation and can hold your hand as you do it, that would be a good thing to do. So find that person, and that's safe. It's always, safety underlies this entire conversation. We didn't really get into that last time, but approach the water safely, whatever it is. If it's a pool or a big wave, just take all the necessary precautions and be safe about it. Yeah.
It really is a thing about respect, isn't it? I've been in the ocean since I was a baby, and even the last 2 weeks when I've been down the coast, if I go down on my own, I always exercise some caution, even though I know I could handle most situations. Right. And it extends to any level of competence, doesn't it? Some respect for the ocean, because we're so insignificant. Well, anyway.
You can learn those lessons. Yeah, you can learn those lessons so quickly. And the ocean can clobber you even when you're feeling like you got it all together. So you're right. Yeah, all that respect, bring it every time.
Nicole has a question for you. She's 1,000+ days in a row now swimming in the ocean. She wants to know, can too much salt water damage our bodies?
Well, I have not heard. I mean, if you're not ingesting a lot of salt water, that could be a problem. There are sort of medical conditions and reports of people who have tried to subsist on straight salt water. It doesn't go well. And that doesn't sound like that's what you're doing. So people do ask, is there too much blue mind? Is that possible? The answer is yes. There are no real side effects, but it can interfere with your social life a bit.
And your job.
and your job, and therefore your income. And if your social life goes down the tubes and you lose your job because of your blue-minded activities, there will be physical ramifications to both of those things: extra stress, sadness, financial strife, perhaps, foreclosure. There's a long list of things that can occur. So as long as it's not interfering with the other necessary aspects of your life and livelihood, you shouldn't have any issues. That's an excellent question. There's a great movie, some people may recall, Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
I knew you were going to say that. Jeff Spicoli.
Spicoli, and Sean Penn is the actor. Of all people, you look back on that and you go, wow, that guy's got range. If you become Spicoli in the process, you might have, there are trade-offs, let's just say. Being surfing all the time and doing the things that you might do between surfing may preclude healthy relationships and a job, a career. But maybe you're good with that. Maybe Spicoli is your role model, and then in that case, have fun.
I've got a question here from Pete, who's a mad body surfer. And he wants to know, why am I so happy body surfing? What is happening? What is actually happening to my mind and my body?
Well, it took me 300 pages to unpack that very question. To say it's complex is not a dodge, but it's true. So all of your senses are differently engaged when you're body surfing, as opposed to many, if not most, of the activities we're accustomed to on land. So visually, auditorially, somatically, it's an entirely different experience in the water. The way you move, the way you're held by the water, the temperature, the way it surrounds you and holds you. And it's like there aren't that many other exercise modalities where you're being hugged by the earth and you feel it. You feel that hug. It could be a warm hug or a cold hug, but it's a hug and it's holding you. And you're torpedoing through a wave that is unique in the history of the universe. That wave has never happened before. Nothing exactly like that wave has ever existed, and it's yours.
Is it grounding you? Like you ground yourself when you walk with bare feet on the earth? Is it similar to that?
Well, I would imagine that it's grounding you in the sense that all of your senses are given back bandwidth. So visually, auditorily, and somatically, you get all this bandwidth back. It's simplified. There are no billboards, there's no screens, there's nobody vying for your attention other than you and the water. And that's vastly different from most of our modern lives. And in that space, you're allowed to, you have the space to move into what's commonly referred to as a flow state. And that physical interaction with the water facilitates that. So playing into that is a little bit of red mind, right? So that's what really makes the water work so well, is there is that tension, there is that need for respect, there is the unknown, there's a little fear that you're going to get, pummeled and rolled and pile driven headfirst into the sand, or not. And so there's that sort of element of danger, but it isn't the psychological social danger that we dread all day long because of the different interactions, different fears. So it's all of that together that creates that stoke, right? I call it blue mind, and there are many other words for it. Add into that, depending on where you are, the potential for a wildlife interaction, the potential for bioluminescence, the potential for, in the Monterey Bay, you might surf with an otter, or some dolphins may go by, or you may see a whale spout offshore from you. Birds diving, fish jumping, kelp, jellies, the whole mix. Being in the water with them as well sets up our sense of awe and wonder. And what we do know from the psychologists who study awe and wonder is that puts us into a different state of mind. That emotion we call awe sets us up for pro-social behavior and other than ourselves thinking, and those oneness kinds of feelings that we get and struggle to describe. So that's a pretty good cocktail to, and you call it body surfing. It's a pretty simple name, but there's so much more going on. Or boogie boarding, or surfing, or paddle boarding. I like these days to be immersed in the water, in the waves, as much as possible, rather than standing on a board or any kind of board, or having my belly on a board. I like to grab a hand plane and some fins and just be in the water as much as possible, because I enjoy just the contact full time and waiting very little. Small waves, many. Thanks.
Agree. I agree. I on that, Wallace, since we last spoke, my wife and I and the kids went down the coast for a few weeks, and my eldest daughter took up surfing. My son's finally had a troubled ear fixed, and my youngest is just like a mini fish. Are you getting blue mind by getting enjoyment by watching them? So I'm helping my daughter onto a board, watching her surf the foamy waves all the way into the shore, watching my son get that. He was wearing goggles while he was diving under the waves. And my wife said, you know, why are you wearing goggles? He said, because I can see everything that's going on. I can see the turbulence. Watching other people, is that giving you blue mind as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll break it down really fast because it's actually not that fast. So we can get blue mind from wild water. We can get blue mind. So those are the lakes and the rivers and the oceans that are free. We can get blue mind from domesticated water, domestic water. That's the wild water that's temporarily suspended for our use. So tubs and tubes and hoses and showers and tanks and pools. You can do it there too. And urban water, so fountains and urban waterfronts also work. And then it gets a little more esoteric and virtual water. So paintings of water, music about water, poems about water, any kind of artwork, prose and sculptures about water, where there's no water actually present, but the physical representation through art and music and prose brings it, makes it portable. So that's a category that's virtual water. Then we can go to the imaginary water. And that's what you're kind of talking about. So you're imagining yourself and you're empathizing with your kids or anyone that you might be watching. And you might be watching them in person or might be watching them on a screen. You might be reading a letter that they wrote about their swimming. I have a beloved letter that I wrote from summer camp to my parents. And in it, I described swimming in a lake in detail and how much I was enjoying it and how much better at it I was getting. And then the sailing and the canoeing. And I imagine them reading that letter, it made them emote and feel blue mind at a distance through their imagination, facilitated by a letter. Right? So that's imaginary, the imaginary kind of blue mind that comes from our memories, comes from sort of empathizing. So if you ever been at a party with a group of surfers standing in a circle talking about their day, and you take turns, you share stories, and everybody's basically catching that wave with the storyteller. You can almost imagine it if they're good at telling that story. And it's quite fun to hear everybody's best wave stories. And you're standing in a living room or standing on a porch or a patio far from the water. And you're imagining it through the storytelling. And so that's one of the categories. And the last category is metaphoric water. So our language is full of water-based metaphors. And those give you a little bit of blue mind when you hear them. Words like flow and made a splash, or don't fight the river, or all these metaphors that we have in our language. And I think water creates the most metaphors of anything, really. Water and fire, perhaps. So probably the best experiences of blue mind involve wild water. Maybe involve wild water with those you care about, your friends and your family. I'm not ranking them, but taken together, it gives us this incredible toolkit. So as we inevitably age, I see people going to the coast in their last weeks or months. They're not going there to go do a big open water swim, to free dive, to surf waves. They're going to look and recall and remember and imagine days when they could do those things, and watch those who still can, and empathize with those individuals. And if they're family members, all the better. So parents and grandparents going with children to the water, absolutely, is a wonderful source of the blue mind emotions. Yeah.
You spoke earlier about part of expanding the blue mind and part of the thrills you spoke about, a body surfer and nature. So I think I mentioned last time, um, probably about half a dozen times now, particularly in lockdown when we were swimming in winter, we had dolphins swim around us. So they would come out of nowhere, but we wouldn't get a fright. It was just as if it was supposed to happen. They'd swim underneath us. You could see them smiling at us. Then they'd swim around us, do a few jumps in the water and swim off. Is there a way that that connection can be described? Is that blue mind between, is that blue mind for both the dolphins and us? What's that? What's that connection? Or is it just sheer joy?
Yeah. Well, it's certainly awe and wonder.
Mm.
Um, I think probably I can't really speak to what dolphins are thinking about us, but I have a better chance of being accurate if I speak of what we think of them.
Mm.
Uh, I think we find them beautiful. I think on some level there's some jealousy. At least that's what I feel. I'll speak for myself, not for
Mm-hmm.
my fellow humans. When I'm in the water with dolphins or on the surface of the water with them, I admire them so much, and there's a twinge of jealousy. I'd love to trade places sometimes, and but it's mostly admiration for their agility and their strength. And those are all very positive emotions that if you feel them in any context, uh, they shift your neurochemistry in a good way.
Mm.
So if you're working with someone, a non-dolphin, perhaps a human, and you admire the way they think and the way they work and the way they do their art, the way they navigate their career, their life, the way they speak or they perform, um, that's wonderful. There might be a little jealousy rolled in there, and that may help you strive to be better at those things yourself. Um, but that's really, those are great emotions to feel when you're in the company of others. So if the others happen to be a dolphin or a sea turtle, a whale, an otter, so be it. I've spent myself in my career, spent a lot of time, an extraordinary amount of time with sea turtles professionally, and admiring them in the water, admiring their resilience, um, measuring them, taking samples for studies, and pondering what they're doing and tracking them with transmitters. And I have to say, there's one turtle in particular that is probably my best mentor in my life. And I don't say that to be silly. I'm very literal. And we named her Adelita, and a loggerhead sea turtle that swam between Baja California and Japan, and got to know her while she was in captivity, and then feeding her and scrubbing her shell, and then we were able to release her, and she made a beeline for home, which happened to be Japan. And so I spent every day with her virtually.
Wow.
And learned so much about the world from that creature. And so I think that's also possible. I think we're not necessarily taught to find mentorship from wild animals, but why not? And so when you're in the water and you're lucky enough to have those moments, bring the respect, but open up all your senses and take that all in, because those are the moments that stick with you. And when you're stuck in traffic or in some situation that is the opposite of that, and you can just close your eyes and go back there, that can get you through those spots. So enjoy it and soak it up, for sure.
Speaking of dynamic and relationship with animals, how do we reconcile our conflict with sharks? So I think this summer in Australia, we've had 4 or 5 fatal shark attacks.
Well, there's sort of a simple answer. But that's tragic. And I don't, I heart goes out to people who have had fatal or near fatal or serious injuries from any animal, sharks or otherwise. The simple answer is don't go in the water. You'll never, I promise, have to deal with a shark attack ever again. Assuming that you make that choice, that you want to take those chances, there's a certain amount of risk. And there's a risk with driving an automobile. It's much higher than, shark attacks on average, right? But obviously the risk goes up depending on where you are in the world, depending on the season, depending on the time of day, depending on the activity that you're doing, etc. So I think the strategy for humans is to be as smart and as aware as possible. Listen to those who know a lot more than you. Follow the guidelines. Take the precautions. Certainly, the answer is not to eradicate sharks. That's kind of silly. That's like saying I live in the desert and I'm worried about skin cancer. So let's blot out the sun. It's kind of silly, right? So taking necessary precautions, knowing that there's an innate risk when you enter into a wild animal's habitat that they're going to be themselves.
Do you think we forget that we're in their habitat because we completely establish ourselves, as you've said in your book, around the coastline and on the beaches, and we forget that that's actually where they live as well?
It's really easy to forget. Yeah. Especially, let's just like complicate matters a bit. If you're just blissed out and having the best, day of your life surfing or diving or swimming and whatever you're doing, it's easy to, slip into this blue mind, mildly meditative place where you let your guard down. You may not see the signals. You may be alone rather than with your buddies, looking after each other. That's key component. Especially if there is an incident. So to be alone after an incident, your risk of fatality or more serious injury goes way up. But when you're with someone that can take care of you and you them, then your chances go the risk goes down. The rescue possibility goes up, obviously. So, but I think if you know you're going to be in shark habitat for the day, doing the things that make you look, interesting, be as informed as you can. And if you don't know what that means, then you're not. And I'm not a shark expert, but I know some, and quite a few people who spend a lot of time around sharks that understand their behavior really well and have really minimized the threats to themselves and to those that are with them by being informed and knowledgeable and practiced and super respectful. So, but it's like any activity that has a risk to it, really. And it remains fairly rare. The loss of any life through a wildlife attack is horrific, for all of us, to learn about those things. It's shocking and it's disturbing and extremely heartbreaking.
Do the shark repellent bans work that people market and sell? If
Yeah, mixed bag on some of them. We can't really go through the full list. Some of them might be a little heavier on the marketing and lighter on the efficacy, and others the other way around. So I mean, there are people have obviously created these shark suits that you can wear while you're diving, and different patterned wetsuits, different kinds of emitters. Um, in a completely different realm, some of that technology is being used to attach to fishing nets to keep certain species away from the nets. So again, that's where, as we get smarter and learn how to coexist, we can bring in some of these tools and technologies. But the basic rules about dawn and dusk, murky water,
Yep.
not swimming alone, those hold up pretty well.
River mouths? River mouths are more
River
dangerous?
mouths, depending on where you are and the species that are around, you have like the bull sharks like to hang out at river mouths, and some parts of the world, your tiger sharks are more of an issue. And then there are the really kind of much less aggressive and sharks you don't have a problem surfing with, and you might not even see them unless you've got drone footage, but they're there, and just less of a concern. But tigers and great whites and bull sharks in certain parts of the world are certainly a concern. And those beaches usually ideally have good lifeguarding systems and surveillance these days. The drones are now ubiquitous, allow us to see and monitor popular areas. And meanwhile, let's get to the sort of the gist of it. Is shark conservation is working hard to increase the population of sharks, and ideally increase the population of their prey, and ideally the overall coastal ecosystems. So, let's be clear, we have a fear of sharks for a reason. Our ancestors dealt with them, and they can kill us. So the more educated you are on their biology, as well as how to behave, the better off you are. Yeah.
Final question, Jay, from a gentleman called George. George writes in, he said, "My wife has always had a fear of the ocean. I love it and want to share my joy with her. It's even affecting where we go for our holidays. How can I approach this? How can I get her to enjoy the water or reduce her fear of the water? Is there anything that he can do?"
Well, let's just start with saying, George, that's love. That's like for me, that's the definition of love: the desire to share what you love most with the one you love most. That's true love. And it's almost to the point of being a cliche that being by the water together, any water, the water you care about, is among the most romantic things we can do to bring us closer to each other. So start there, maybe have that conversation, that loving, romantic conversation that says, I want to share what I love most with the person I love most and experience more love together. And kind of reminds me a little bit of the question about, fear of deep water. Take it incrementally and find the small steps towards the activities that are mutually enjoyable, and then explore the activities that maybe are more enjoyable to her than they are to you. I feel like I'm like the self-help guy tonight. I got it. I'm a biologist. I don't, but so I would approach it that way, that incremental find the common grounds. If you approach it from a position of compromising as much as you can by the ocean, to do the things that are on her yes list and to build the confidence and those activities. And then maybe adding one of the things that are on your yes list that might be a stretch for her. That's a good approach. But I use the example of my mom again, lifelong fear of water. In my dream was to be in the water with her, snorkeling, swimming with sea turtles. That's her nightmare. My dream was her nightmare, literally. And so I was guiding a trip in the Galapagos, and she was my plus one. And there was an opportunity for us to go snorkeling to a spot that was just full of green turtles, just great, solid population, and in the water, not up on the beach, but in some fairly deep water. And the water wasn't that warm; it was pretty chilly. But so we had wetsuits on and masks and snorkels and fins. She's wasn't into it, snorkeling or just being in the water. So we ended up we tried a lesson in mask, snorkel. Here's how it works: you breathe. If you get water in, you blow it out. That was really, really major discomfort for her while being scared to death in the water in the first place. So I ditched her mask and snorkel on the beach, and I said, let's go. You just get on my back. She said, you sure? Are you sure? So yeah, get on my back. We got in the water. She's on my back. She got her arms around my neck, just a death grip around my neck. And I had to ask her to let up once in a while, not strangle me, because if I can't breathe, we're going to be in big trouble. So we swam pretty far out and found the spot with all these, like, so many sea turtles. I could see them all swimming beneath me, and I knew eventually they'd come up for breaths around us. And one of them came up right near us, and she saw it right next to us and started screaming, "There's a sea turtle!" Like telling me that there was a sea turtle, as if I didn't know. With my head in the water, I could see them all. And she saw the one, start screaming in my ear, and then strangling me more. And I had to say, that moment, my mom screaming in my ear with her arms wrapped around me, squeezing tight, scared but completely overjoyed and way outside of her comfort zone. One of the best moments of my entire life, right there. Can't speak for her. I think she likes the story now. In fact, I'll send this to her so she can relive it. And then we were back on the beach, relaxed, drying out, sitting in the sun, warming up. And she says, "Thank you. I don't ever need to do that again, though." And that's that. That's the story. And so maybe have a few of those kinds of moments where you compromise, she compromises, you do something outside of one's comfort zone, and then you talk about it forever. That's pretty sweet.
Jay, thank you for coming back today. Thank you for expanding on the blue mind. I don't know if they were the questions you're expecting, but you've certainly given some amazing answers, and we really appreciate you being with us again.
Thanks for inviting me back, and thank you to everyone who provided the questions, and very thoughtful, insightful, and enjoyable questions to chat with you about. Really appreciate that.